The rain fell mercilessly as Cassandra Gibson pulled her jacket tighter around her shoulders, her heels clicking against the wet pavement of the deserted parking lot. She sensed something was wrong the moment she stepped out of the restaurant. The prickling sensation of being watched followed. 3 men had been eyeing her throughout her business dinner, and now the same trio trailed several yards behind, their pace quickening as hers did. Cassandra cursed under her breath. Of all days to dismiss her security detail, insisting she needed one normal evening without the constant shadow of protection. The irony wasn't lost on her. At 32, she'd built Gibson Technologies from the ground up, transformed it into a multi-billion-dollar empire, yet here she was, vulnerable as anyone else in a dark parking lot. Her car was still 50 yards away when she heard the footsteps closing in. Heart pounding, she fumbled with her keys, nearly dropping them. "Hey lady, nice watch. Looks expensive," a gruff voice called out. Cassandra didn't turn around. "I'm not looking for trouble." "That's good, cause we're just looking for some donations," another voice said, followed by laughter. She quickened her pace, but knew she wouldn't make it to her car before they reached her. The parking lot was nearly empty at this hour, just a few scattered vehicles, no witnesses. "I think you can spare some cash for guys down on their luck," the first man said, now close enough that she could smell alcohol on his breath. That's when she heard the sound of a car door slamming and a deep voice calling out, "Everything okay over there?" Scott Calloway had just buckled his 6-year-old daughter Lily into her booster seat when he noticed the scene unfolding across the parking lot. He'd been working a double shift at the construction site, only leaving to pick up his daughter from the after-school program that was threatening to kick her out if he was late on payments one more time. They'd stopped for a quick dinner at the cheapest place he could find that still made Lily smile, the diner at the edge of the shopping complex. "Daddy, can we go home? I'm tired," Lily whined from inside the car. "1 second, sweetheart," Scott said, keeping his eyes on the woman and the 3 men approaching her. His instinct screamed that something wasn't right. "Stay in the car, Lily. Lock the doors," he instructed, closing her door and making sure the child lock was engaged. Scott was exhausted. His hands were calloused from 12 hours of labor, his back ached, and his bank account was nearly empty after paying for Lily's asthma medication. The last thing he needed was to get involved in someone else's trouble, but he couldn't just watch and do nothing. "Hey." He called out, his voice carrying across the lot as he strode toward the group. At 6'2" with broad shoulders from years of construction work, Scott's presence alone was often enough to make people reconsider poor decisions. The 3 men turned, momentarily distracted from Cassandra. Scott could see her clearly now, beautiful, elegant, and clearly terrified despite her composed exterior. "This doesn't concern you, man," one of the men said, turning to face Scott. "Just having a friendly conversation with the lady." Scott positioned himself between Cassandra and the men. "Doesn't look friendly to me. The lady doesn't seem interested in talking." "Who do you think you are, her bodyguard?" another man sneered. "No," Scott replied calmly, though his heart was racing. "Just someone who thinks 3 guys cornering a woman in a parking lot looks bad." The largest of the 3 stepped forward, sizing Scott up. "Walk away, man. You got no idea what you're stepping into." "I'm thinking it's you 3 who should walk away," Scott said, noticing the woman edging behind him. He could feel her trembling slightly. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before one of the men muttered, "Not worth it," and backed up a step. The apparent leader of the group glared at Scott, then at Cassandra. "Lucky your boyfriend showed up," he spat, before backing away with his companions. Scott watched them retreat toward the street before turning to the woman. "Are you okay?" Cassandra nodded, her composure returning now that the immediate threat had passed. "Thanks to you, thank you, no problem." "Some people think they can just take whatever they want," Scott said, noticing her expensive clothing and the diamond watch that had caught their attention. He didn't judge her for it, he just couldn't imagine a life where such things were attainable. "I'm Cassandra," she said, extending her hand. "Scott." He shook her hand, acutely aware of his rough, work-worn palm against her soft skin. "Daddy," Lily's voice called out from the car window she'd rolled down despite his instructions. Is everything okay? Scott smiled apologetically. My daughter, I should get back to her. Cassandra glanced toward the old sedan where a small face peered out anxiously. Of course, would you let me thank you properly? Maybe buy you both dinner sometime. Before Scott could respond, Lily called out again, more insistently. Daddy, I don't feel good. Scott recognized that tone immediately. I'm sorry, I have to go. She has asthma and I think she's having an attack. He was already moving toward his car. Will you be okay getting to your car? Cassandra nodded quickly. Go, please, take care of her. Scott rushed back to find Lily wheezing, her small face pinched with effort. He grabbed her inhaler from the glove compartment, helping her take the medicine with practiced movements. Easy, Lily Bug. Slow breaths, he coached, his heart aching as it always did during her attacks. As he attended to his daughter, he was surprised to see Cassandra approach his car, concern evident on her face. Is she all right? She asked through the open window. Scott nodded, still focused on Lily. She will be. The inhaler helps. I'm fine, Daddy, Lily insisted between labored breaths, eyeing the stranger curiously. I have a car service that can take you to the hospital, Cassandra offered, already pulling out her phone. No hospitals, Scott said quickly. We can't afford. I mean, she'll be fine. This happens sometimes. Cassandra seemed to understand immediately, her eyes softening. At least let me drive you home. You shouldn't have to focus on driving while taking care of her. Scott wanted to refuse. Pride and independence had been his companions since his wife died 3 years ago, leaving him to raise Lily alone. But one look at his daughter's pale face made the decision for him. That would be helpful, thank you, he conceded. 10 minutes later, Scott found himself in the passenger seat of what he realized was a Bentley, giving directions to their modest apartment on the edge of town. Lily's breathing had steadied, but she remained quiet, occasionally glancing at Cassandra with curiosity. You have a nice car, Lily finally said. It smells pretty. Cassandra smiled into the rearview mirror. Thank you, Lily. What grade are you in? First grade, but I'm reading at a 3rd grade level, she announced proudly. That's impressive, Cassandra replied, genuine warmth in her voice. Scott watched the interaction with interest. There was something about Cassandra beyond her obvious beauty and wealth that intrigued him. She drove with confidence, but spoke with genuine kindness to his daughter, never once making him feel judged for their circumstances. When they arrived at the apartment complex, Scott felt a flush of embarrassment at the peeling paint and overflowing dumpsters. This is us, he said, unbuckling his seatbelt. Thank you again for your help tonight, Cassandra said. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't intervened. Anyone would have done the same, Scott replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. Cassandra reached into her purse and handed him a business card. Please call me. I'd really like to thank you properly. Scott took the card, glancing at it briefly before pocketing it. Sure, he said, though he had no intention of calling. Their worlds were too different. Thanks for the ride. He helped Lily out of the car and they watched as the luxurious vehicle disappeared down the street. She was pretty, Daddy, Lily observed as they climbed the stairs to their second-floor apartment. Yes, she was, Scott agreed, unlocking their door and ushering Lily inside. It wasn't until later that night, after Lily was asleep and Scott was sorting through the stack of bills on his kitchen table, that he pulled out Cassandra's card again. In the simple white card with embossed black lettering, he read, Cassandra Gibson, Chief Executive Officer, Gibson Technologies. Scott's eyes widened as recognition hit him. Gibson Technologies was one of the largest tech companies in the country. He'd read about them in the newspapers, about their revolutionary medical software that was changing healthcare, and he'd just rescued their CEO from muggers in a parking lot. He set the card aside, shaking his head at the absurdity of it all. A woman like that wouldn't have any real interest in a struggling construction worker raising his daughter in a run-down apartment. The thank you dinner was just that gratitude for his help, nothing more. The next morning, Scott dropped Lily at school with a reminder to use her inhaler if she felt any tightness in her chest, then headed to the construction site for another grueling day. By afternoon, the previous night's encounter seemed almost like a dream until his foreman approached him during their break. Calloway, there's someone asking for you at the site office. Says she's a friend. Scott frowned, wiping sweat from his brow. A friend. When he reached the office trailer, he was stunned to find Cassandra sitting there, looking completely out of place in her tailored suit among the dusty blueprints and coffee-stained schedules. "Cassandra, what are you doing here?" she stood, seemingly unfazed by the surprise in his voice. "I realized I never got your number last night, and I wanted to make sure Lily was feeling better." "She's fine, thanks," Scott said, acutely aware of his dirty work clothes and the curious stares from his coworkers through the trailer windows. "How did you find me?" Cassandra had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Your license plate. I had someone run it. I'm sorry if that seems intrusive." It did seem intrusive, but Scott was more confused than upset. "Why?" "Because I wanted to see you again," she said simply, "and to properly thank you." "Dinner tonight? I can send a car for you and Lily." Scott hesitated. "Look, I appreciate the offer, but please," Cassandra interrupted. "Just dinner, nothing fancy. Lily mentioned pizza last night. There's a great place I know." The mention of his daughter softened his resolve. Lily would love a night out, and God knew they could use something to break the monotony of their tight-budget existence. "Okay," he finally agreed, "but nothing too extravagant, and I'll drive us." Cassandra's smile was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Perfect, I'll text you the address." As she left, Scott couldn't help but wonder what someone like Cassandra Gibson could possibly want with someone like him. Gratitude only went so far. That evening, after picking up Lily and getting them both cleaned up as best he could, Scott found himself driving to the address Cassandra had sent. It wasn't the high-end restaurant he'd expected, but a cozy pizzeria in a middle-class neighborhood. Cassandra was waiting outside, dressed in jeans, and a simple blouse, a far cry from her business attire, but still exuding an elegance that Scott guessed was impossible to disguise. "Lily." She greeted warmly as they approached. "I'm so glad you're feeling better." "I like your hair," Lily said, noticing that Cassandra had let her dark curls fall loose instead of the tight bun from the previous night. "Thank you," Cassandra replied, then turned to Scott. "I'm glad you came." Inside, over pepperoni pizza, Lily's choice, and craft beer for the adults, conversation flowed surprisingly easily. Scott found himself relaxing as Cassandra asked Lily about school and her favorite books, genuinely interested in the 6-year-old's animated responses. "And what about you?" Cassandra asked Scott when Lily became absorbed in the coloring page the restaurant had provided. "How long have you been in construction?" "Since high school, pretty much," Scott replied. "Started working summers with my uncle, then full-time after graduation." "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills. Most of them, anyway." "There's nobility in working with your hands," Cassandra said. "Building things that last." Scott studied her, trying to detect any condescension, but found only sincerity. "What about you?" "I looked up Gibson Technologies after I saw your card. Pretty impressive." Cassandra shrugged, a gesture that seemed to minimize her accomplishments. "It was my father's company originally. I've just expanded it in new directions." "Just expanded it into a billion-dollar enterprise," Scott noted with a half-smile. "You've done your research," she said, looking slightly uncomfortable for the first time. "Hard not to when your company is constantly in the business section," he replied. "Which makes me wonder why you're sitting here having pizza with us instead of at some charity gala or board meeting." Cassandra's expression grew serious. "Because when those men approached me last night, I wasn't CEO Cassandra Gibson. I was just a scared woman in a parking lot. And you didn't help me because of my title or bank account. You helped because it was the right thing to do." She glanced at Lily, then back to Scott. "That kind of authenticity is rare in my world." The simple honesty of her words struck Scott deeply. Before he could respond, Lily tugged at his sleeve. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" The evening ended with ice cream and promises to meet again. Over the next few weeks, those promises materialized into more dinners, a trip to the Children's Museum with Lily, and eventually, a dinner just for the two adults while Lily stayed with a neighbor. Scott learned that behind Cassandra's success was a woman who worked 18-hour days, who had transformed her father's modest software company into a healthcare technology giant after watching her mother die from a misdiagnosis. He learned that she lived alone in a penthouse that felt too big, that she could recite poetry from memory, and that despite her wealth, she often felt isolated. Cassandra, in turn, discovered Scott's unwavering dedication to Lily, his talent for woodworking that he pursued in what little spare time he had, and the grief he still carried for his late wife, Emma, who had died from complications after a routine surgery. Their worlds began to merge in unexpected ways. Scott found himself discussing business strategies with Cassandra over coffee in his small kitchen. Cassandra helped Lily with a science project, sitting cross-legged on the living room floor surrounded by glitter and construction paper. One rainy Saturday, 2 months after their first meeting, Cassandra invited them to her penthouse. Scott had resisted until then, uncomfortable with the stark reminder of their different circumstances. But Lily's excitement at the prospect of seeing where Cassandra lived eventually won out. The penthouse was everything Scott had imagined: spacious, elegantly furnished, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. But what surprised him was how comfortable it felt. There were books everywhere, family photos, a half-finished puzzle on a side table. "This place is amazing," Lily exclaimed, running to the windows to press her nose against the glass. "Lily, careful," Scott cautioned, afraid she might smudge the pristine surface. "It's fine," Cassandra assured him. "Windows can be cleaned. Excitement can't be contained." As Lily explored the apartment under Cassandra's watchful eye, Scott noticed a photo on the mantel, a younger Cassandra with an older man, both in graduation caps and gowns. "My father," Cassandra explained, seeing his interest. "He died 5 years ago, heart attack at his desk. He was always working." "Is that why you work so much?" Scott asked gently. Cassandra considered the question. "Partly, but also because it was easier than admitting how lonely I was." She met his gaze. "Until recently." The air between them changed, charged with unspoken feelings that had been building for weeks. Scott moved closer, his hand brushing hers. "Cassandra, Daddy, look. Cassandra has a telescope," Lily called from across the room, breaking the moment. The evening progressed with dinner, prepared by Cassandra herself, a surprisingly good pasta dish that impressed Scott, and ended with the three of them on her balcony, using the telescope to look at the stars while Cassandra pointed out constellations. As they were leaving, Lily already half asleep in Scott's arms, Cassandra touched his shoulder. "Can we talk tomorrow, just us?" Scott nodded, his heart beating faster at the serious tone in her voice. The next day, they met at a quiet cafe halfway between their homes. Cassandra seemed nervous, fidgeting with her coffee cup in a way Scott had never seen before. "What's on your mind?" he finally asked. "I've been offered a position in our London office," she said, her eyes meeting his. "A 6-month leadership exchange program. It's a big opportunity for the company's international expansion." Scott felt his stomach drop. "I see. When would you leave?" 2 weeks, she replied, "unless I have a reason to stay." The implication hung between them. Scott took a deep breath, organizing his thoughts. "Cassandra, these past months have been incredible. You're amazing with Lily, and what's happening between us is something I never expected to find again after Emma died." "But," she prompted, hearing the hesitation in his voice, "but our lives are so different. You run a billion-dollar company. I struggle to make rent sometimes. You travel the world for business. I can barely afford the gas to drive Lily to school. How could this possibly work long-term?" Cassandra reached across the table, taking his hand. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Scott? I see a man who works harder than anyone I know, who loves his daughter fiercely, who stepped in to help a stranger without a second thought for his own safety." Her grip tightened. "Money, status, those things don't define compatibility. Values do. And your values are exactly what I've been searching for." "It's not just about money," Scott argued. "It's about fitting into each other's worlds. I don't belong in board meetings and charity galas. And who says I belong in construction sites and PTA meetings?" she countered. "But I've never felt more myself than when I'm with you and Lily. We can figure out the rest." Scott wanted to believe her. The past 2 months had shown him that a future with Cassandra wasn't as impossible as he'd initially thought. But fear still gripped him, fear of not being enough, of disrupting Lily's life if things didn't work out. "I need time to think," he finally said. "This affects Lily too. Cassandra nodded, understanding in her eyes. Of course, just don't think too long, she added with a small smile. I have a plane ticket with my name on it. The next week was torturous for Scott. He threw himself into work, spent extra time with Lily, and replayed every moment with Cassandra in his mind. Lily, perceptive as always, noticed his distraction. Are you sad because Cassandra's going away? She asked one night as he tucked her in. Scott sat on the edge of her bed. How did you know about that? She told me when she helped me with my reading yesterday, Lily said. She said she might have to go to London for work. What do you think about that? Scott asked carefully. Lily considered the question with the seriousness only a child could muster. I think she doesn't want to go. She likes us, and I like her. She makes you smile like Mommy used to. Scott's throat tightened at the mention of Emma. You remember that? Lily nodded. I was little, but I remember. And I think Mommy would be happy that you're happy again. Out of the mouths of babes, Scott thought, overwhelmed by his daughter's insight. The next morning, Scott made his decision. He called in to work, citing a family emergency, and drove to Gibson Technologies headquarters downtown. The imposing glass building reflected the morning sun as he parked his beat-up sedan in the visitor's lot. At the reception desk, he asked for Cassandra Gibson. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked, eyeing his casual clothes skeptically. No, but miss. Gibson is in meetings all day. She cut him off politely but firmly. Scott was about to argue when a familiar voice called his name. He turned to see James, Cassandra's assistant whom he'd met during one of their dinner dates. Scott, what brings you here? James asked, approaching with a friendly smile. I need to see Cassandra. It's important. James glanced at his tablet. She's in the quarterly board meeting right now. It should be wrapping up in about 20 minutes. Want to wait in her office? Scott nodded gratefully, following James to the executive elevator and up to the top floor. Cassandra's office was as impressive as he'd imagined. Corner views of the city, modern furnishings, walls lined with awards and degrees. Can I get you anything? Coffee, water, James offered. I'm fine, thanks, Scott replied, too nervous to consume anything. 20 minutes stretched into 30, then 40. Scott paced the office, rehearsing what he wanted to say. Finally, the door opened and Cassandra walked in, surprise registering on her face when she saw him. Scott. What are you doing here? He took a deep breath. I came to give you a reason to stay. Her expression softened as she closed the door behind her. I'm listening. I love you, Scott said simply. I've been fighting it because I thought our differences were too great. But the truth is, I've never met anyone like you. Not just because of your success or intelligence, but because of your heart. The way you care about Lily, the way you see the world, the way you make me feel like anything is possible. He stepped closer. I don't know how we make this work long term. I don't know if I'll ever be comfortable in your world or if you'll get tired of mine. But I know that I want to try. I want us to figure it out together. Cassandra's eyes glistened with unshed tears. That's all I wanted to hear, she whispered, closing the distance between them and wrapping her arms around his neck. I love you too, Scott, and I love Lily. We'll figure it out, I promise. Their kiss sealed the promise, a beginning rather than an ending. 6 months later, Scott stood in the backyard of their new home, a compromise between his modest needs and Cassandra's resources. Not a mansion, but a comfortable house with a yard for Lily to play in. Situated in a good school district halfway between the construction company where Scott now worked as a project manager, a promotion Cassandra had nothing to do with. He'd made sure of that, and Gibson Technologies. Lily was helping Cassandra plant flowers in the garden beds, both of them covered in dirt and laughing. The London position had been delegated to another executive, with Cassandra opting to focus on domestic operations and a more balanced life. The transition hadn't been seamless. There had been arguments about money, about parenting styles, about balancing career demands with family time. Scott had initially refused to let Cassandra pay for anything related to Lily, insisting on maintaining his financial responsibility as a father. Cassandra had struggled to reduce her workaholic tendencies, sometimes missing dinner or bedtime stories because of emergency conference calls. But they had worked through each challenge together, finding compromise and growing stronger as a couple and as a family. Lily had blossomed under Cassandra's additional guidance, her asthma better managed with access to specialists, her natural intelligence nurtured by both adults in her life. "Daddy, come see the butterfly garden we're making," Lily called, waving him over. Scott joined them, kneeling beside the flower bed where they were carefully arranging native plants designed to attract butterflies and hummingbirds. "Cassandra says butterflies are like magic," Lily informed him solemnly. "They start as one thing and become something completely different, but they're the same inside." "That's pretty profound," Scott said, catching Cassandra's eye over Lily's head. "I was trying to explain metamorphosis," Cassandra said with a smile, but Lily made it poetic. "Like us," Scott said quietly, "we've all changed, but we're still ourselves." Cassandra reached out, dirt-covered fingers finding his. "Exactly like us." Later that evening, after Lily was asleep, Scott and Cassandra sat on the porch swing, watching fireflies illuminate the dusk. "I got a call from Dr. Patel today," Cassandra said, leaning against Scott's shoulder. "The pediatric asthma app is ready for clinical trials. If it works like we think it will, it could help thousands of kids like Lily better manage their condition." The app had been Cassandra's brainchild, inspired by watching Scott track Lily's symptoms and triggers. Gibson Technologies was developing it as part of their healthcare initiative. "That's amazing," Scott said, genuinely proud. "You're changing lives." "We're changing lives," she corrected. "I wouldn't have thought of it without you and Lily." Scott kissed the top of her head, marveling at how intertwined their lives had become. "Remember that night in the parking lot?" he asked. "When those guys were following you, how could I forget? I was terrified." "I almost didn't stop," Scott admitted. "I was exhausted, worried about money, focused on Lily. I almost drove away." Cassandra turned to look at him. "But you didn't." "No, I didn't, and now look at us." "Best decision you ever made," she teased. "Second best," he corrected, reaching into his pocket. "This might be the best." He pulled out a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring elegant but not ostentatious, exactly Cassandra's style. "I've been carrying this around for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment," Scott said, his voice husky with emotion. "But I realized there's no such thing as a perfect moment. There's just us building a life together day by day. So, Cassandra Gibson, will you marry me?" Tears filled Cassandra's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, absolutely yes." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Scott reflected on the unlikely journey that had brought them together: a chance encounter in a parking lot, a moment of courage, and the gradual discovery that sometimes the most unexpected connections are the ones that change everything. They sealed their engagement with a kiss, fireflies dancing around them like stars fallen to earth, witnesses to a love that had bridged two different worlds and created something new, something stronger, something complete.